Hello, it's ChewDog Charts. Today we're going to talk about pensions. A new report from the Hoover Institution entitled Hidden Debt, Hidden Deficits: How Pension Promises Are Consuming State and Local Budgets illustrates the true severity of America's public pension crisis. As part of the study, 649 state, county, and local pension systems in the United States were ranked based on funding status and impact on local budgets. What was found was hidden taxpayer debt burden in the form of unfunded pension liabilities totals over $3.8 trillion. Of course, $3.8 trillion taxpayer obligation is actually much larger if you apply some common sense math as opposed to pension math. As of fiscal year 2015, the latest year for which complete accounts are available for all cities, states, governments, reported unfunded liabilities of $1.378 trillion under recently implemented governmental accounting standards. However, if calculated properly using market valuation techniques, that true unfunded liability owed to workers based on their current service and salaries is more than $3.846 trillion. Now, the governmental accounting standards still preserved the basic flaw in governmental pension accounting: the fallacy that liabilities can be measured by choosing an expected return on plan assets. Specifically, the liability-weighted average expected return chosen by systems in 2015 was 7.6%. A 7.6% expected return implies that state and city governments are expecting the value of the money they invest today to double approximately every 9.5 years. That means a typical government would view a promise to make a worker a $100,000 payment in 2026 as fully funded, even if it had set aside only $50,000 in assets in 2016. What could go wrong? Let's take a look at the charts. This chart here shows the state funding ratios with the worst 25 states, Illinois topping the list through Georgia. In the right are the columns of unfunded liabilities. First column is the stated unfunded liabilities, and the second column is the recalculated market value of unfunded liabilities. Essentially, the stated unfunded liabilities is a procedure that uses as inputs the forecast of investment returns on fundamentally risky asset and ignores the risk necessary to target the hoped-for returns. This chart here shows the state contributions, actual versus required, to prevent rise in unfunded liability. Again, the 25 worst states. The gray bar is the actual contribution. The darker bar is the amount required to prevent rise in unfunded liability under the expected return. And then the blue bar is what's required to prevent rise in unfunded liability under the market valuation scenario. And as we can see here is that there's a relatively large disparity no matter what state you look at, and that indicates that anywhere from 15 to 25% of their respective revenue base is required just to maintain the current funding levels. And how likely is that? This chart here shows the lowest 20 cities with regard to the city funding ratio. And again, no surprise, Chicago leads the pack. You have the two columns on the right with the stated unfunded liability versus the market value calculation of the unfunded liability. Chicago's largest pension may run out of cash in as little as 4 years, and others have commented that the Chicago teacher's pension would be called a Ponzi scheme if it were a hedge fund. Take a look at this list and see where your city is. Mine's not here, but we'll get to it soon enough. And this chart here shows the city contributions, the actual versus required to prevent the rise in unfunded liability, the 20 worst cities. Again, we have the gray bar, which is the actual contribution, the darker bar, which is the amount required to prevent a rise in unfunded liability under the expected return, then the tan bar, which is the amount required to prevent the rise in unfunded liability under the market value scenario. And we see that we're topped here again, the 20 worst cities, Chicago being the worst, followed by a Rust Belt city, Milwaukee, but surprisingly, several cities from Texas, including Fort Worth, Dallas, Austin, El Paso, and Houston. And then we round out to the West Coast for San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, and then Portland. Now, it is of note that Chicago would have to spend nearly 45% of its annual budget on pension contributions just to avoid losing additional ground. And Chicago's not going to be able to do that unless they do something like raise taxes across the board. This is the county list showing the 25 largest counties with pension systems, the worst being Wayne County, just barely beating out Cook County, Illinois. Various other Rust Belt counties are here. However, we are starting to have a relatively large count of California counties, including Kern County, Orange County, Santa Clara County, San Diego County, Fresno, Ventura, Contra Costa, San Bernardino, and Los Angeles County. Rounding out the very bottom is Macomb County. And this last chart shows, again, the county contributions, the actual versus required, with the gray bar being the actual contribution, the darker bar being the required contribution under the expected return, and then the last bar, which is a light green, is the amount required to prevent a rise in unfunded liability under the market value scenario. We see here that when it comes to pensions underfunded relative to county revenue sources, California wins the day with 10 of the worst 11 counties. Now, I really got to leave California because in order to make up for the underfunding, what is each county, city, or state going to do? They're going to raise taxes. We already see that in the state of Illinois, where there is a tremendous amount of flight out of the cities of Chicago, the Cook County, and the state of Illinois. They're going to come after you and I, the taxpayer. So be careful out there. For today, it's ChewDog Charts. Thank you.